From League Safe World Headquarters, it's Fantasy Football Almost Daily. With Paul Charchia, Matt Harrison, Christian Peterson, and Brian Johnson.
Hello and welcome to Fantasy Football Almost Daily. It is Wednesday, and that means it's time for the Panic Room. My co-hosts today, Christian Peterson, Matt Harrison.
Two-time defending champ.
Two-time defending, absolutely. We relegated poor hapless Brian Johnson.
I can't believe you didn't introduce him as the
two-time defending champion.
I get no
Take
respect.
two, the two-time defending champion.
It's like not calling somebody a doctor.
Yes.
Brian hasn't crawled out from underneath his desk since last
He went
week.
fetal.
Yeah.
Actually didn't even move from this chair for 3 or 4 days.
That's true.
Hooked an IV up to him.
Yeah.
Had an amazing 2-0
Mostly
lead and just
Northeast.
pissed it away.
Oh, huge choke.
He did have
Yeah,
it. Yep.
Brian,
He lost it on a 2-zip lead. Very sad. The way the Panic Room works, as you probably know by now, is we give you 5 players that fantasy owners are panicked about and ask if you should be not at all panicked, somewhat panicked, or acutely panicked over those players. Matt and Christian will compete to make a case for none, some, or acute levels of panic for each of the 3 guys. 5 guys, excuse me. So, and I will decide who has made the better case. It's less even about who's right and wrong, and more about just how robustly you have built your case. Make
It's
sense?
like lawyer school for fantasy football.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's how it works. All right, we begin with our first player, Carson Palmer. Carson Palmer, who's coming off a 0 touchdown, 4 interception performance in Buffalo, almost as bad as his NFC Championship game where he looked absolutely brutal. And I think fantasy owners are concerned. But what level of concern should they have? We begin with our 2-time reigning champion, Christian Peterson. None, some, or acute levels of panic over Carson Palmer.
I'm going to go with just some. On Carson Palmer, you mentioned the 4 interceptions last week, and of course everybody remembers the playoffs of the 4 interceptions then. If you can actually go back to since late last year.
When he broke his finger.
Is that what happened in
Yep.
week, what was it?
He was playing on a broken finger from like week 12 forward, roughly.
So I went back to week 15, which was admittedly a convenient time for me. But since then, he's averaged 265 yards, 1.6 touchdowns, and 1.5 interceptions per game. Before that, up until week 15 of last year, he was at over 300 yards, a full touchdown more, and almost a full interception less. So something happened late last year. It might have been the finger.
Which is why I still was optimistic about it.
Or is it that he's 36 years old, an oft-injured guy, just generally speaking, who, I mean, we saw it with Peyton Manning at the end of his career. He just dropped off the cliff, basically.
Right.
Lost his arm strength, and that was it. So there's enough concern here that I say that there's some panic. You should be panicking a little bit. But he has been good. He was pretty good in 2 of the 3 games this year. He had a 3-touchdown game. He went over 300 yards. He had a 2-touchdown game and looked fine in the other one. It was really just this horrendous one against the Bills where he should have been able to do more against them. So, yes, you have to be concerned about an aging guy who's been injury-prone, who had an injury late last year that clearly affected his performance. But I'm not, I'm not going to drop him yet. I'm not panicking quite at that level.
Okay. Matt, none, some, or acute levels of panic on Carson Palmer.
For a lot of the same reasons Christian has, I have acute panic on Carson Palmer because I don't think you cited this, but I see it on your little notes here. His completion percentage dropped from a very consistent 63% over the prior 3 years to only 57% so far this year.
Yeah.
That's a 6% drop off. That's huge. He'll turn 37 in December. He's been an oft-injured guy. And also, he doesn't have to shoulder the load in Arizona anymore because they have David Johnson, the first actual real good running back that they've ever had since he's been there. So I don't think that he's going to put up the QB1 numbers that you drafted him for. And so, therefore, I think there's an acute level of panic. And if you can trade him, I'd trade him now.
Dang it, this is tough.
Ooh.
I think both of you gave compelling cases for your guys.
The David Johnson part is interesting. Like, so he has a good supporting cast, which is part of the reason.
That's part of the reason I still like him, and
Right.
nobody mentioned that.
Fitzgerald, Michael Floyd, John Brown, David
got
Johnson.
all these
There's
options.
a lot of weapons around
Yeah.
him, so I think that's probably enough.
These are
to keep
counter
him.
arguments now.
I know.
I object.
He's adding more into it. I'm going with some because I think that is probably the most likely scenario. Player number 2. Give yourself a star right on the
I will.
whiteboard. By the way,
Oh,
you're
believe.
currently leading 1-0.
We have a scoreboard that pops up on the video for those of
Oh,
you
do we
listening
really?
to it on
Oh,
audio.
that's
There's
nice.
a little scoreboard that.
Okay.
Hey, look, it's right here.
Does it make a dinging sound? Because
No,
it should.
I don't
fine,
have the
ding.
ding quite yet. We'll work on that.
Yeah, work on the
Yep.
ding. You get that a lot, I'm sure. Next up, Ryan Mathews. A lot of concern when Wendell Smallwood and Darren Sproles got significant action, and Smallwood looked pretty good last week. What is the appropriate level of concern you should have over Ryan Mathews, Philadelphia running back? Is that none, some, or acute levels of concern? Matt, you go first.
Do I have this up the
You
right
still
way?
have that up,
It's,
yes.
it's still
Well,
acute
still
for
acute,
me.
okay.
Oh, no. Oh, my gosh. If you drafted Ryan Mathews to be like a bell cow that you thought would shoulder the load for the Eagles offense, maybe one of the few guys on the Eagles offense you could trust this year, you got to be freaking out after last week where he had 2 carries for -5 yards, while Sproles had 8 touches, Barner had 8 carries, Wendell Smallwood had 17. It's a 4-man rotation. Their coach came out today and was just heaping praise on Wendell Smallwood. Gosh, if at best you got to hope that he gets a third of the carries right now in a 4-man rotation. So I'm freaking out over Ryan Matthews.
You are.
I'm just
Calm down. It's gonna be okay.
oh.
Although I will say I also have
acute levels of
level
panic.
concern. I'm freaking out a little bit too now.
Is this like when somebody barfs on a plane and the barf spreads where
around.
the smell and the sounds make everybody else
And
throw up,
eventually
and
you just-
eventually the
you
whole
have no
plane's
choice,
barfing?
but
Ryan Matthews is barf on a plane. That's
He
his new
kind of
nickname.
is. I mean, so you look back at last week and what happened with Barner scoring the touchdown, and
Right.
Smallwood was so involved, as was Sproles, and the excuse given by the Eagles and others was that, well, Ryan Matthews was a little dinged up. That's why he didn't play. He had a little bit of an injury. So if the silver lining is that Ryan Matthews is injured and that's why he didn't perform very well then you're in trouble because Ryan Matthews is always injured. And that's part of this as well.
That's the silver lining?
Even when he's
Freak out together.
Your best case scenario is he's hurt.
and even when he's healthy, he's like Matt said, he's in a 4-headed beast here in the backfield. Darren Sproles is always going to get the receptions. So that takes away the PPR angle for Ryan Matthews, and it sure looks like Smallwood is going to be a good player. He's younger. He was drafted by the current regime. I don't think the Mathews is a holdover from last year. They got rid of DeMarco Murray already. And so I don't think the coaching staff doesn't have any allegiance to a guy that they just inherited. They're more likely to have allegiance to the guy that they picked in the draft in Wendell Smallwood. So I think Matthews, absolutely, you need to be acutely.
I think you're both correct. The right answer really is acute. But I can't take the guy who barfed because he smelled the other guy's barf for the win. I got to take the original barfer.
Ooh.
And that's Matt.
barfer.
The original barfer. That's Matt.
So just like last week, now I've lost one just because I happened randomly. I was
You go
second.
second. Well, that's when you happen to give the
Hey.
same answer. That's the way it works.
The 2-time defending
Champion.
can overcome
Yes.
adversity.
Well, you've proven that last week.
Yeah.
Mark Ingram is our next contestant in the panic room. Mark Ingram has had a nice game on Monday night, but that was his first really solid game of the year. There's concern about rotation there, offense going his way. Finally scored a touchdown, had not scored until Monday night. What is the appropriate level of panic for your 0-3 Saints and Mark Ingram in particular? Christian, scribbling wildly right now.
Yeah, feverishly.
Feverishly, yes.
I'm going to go with some.
Okay.
I didn't love Mark Ingram coming into the season, to be honest, so this doesn't really surprise me that much, partly because he's never finished better than the number 15 running back in fantasy scoring, depending on your scoring system, of course. He's just not a guy that first of all, that typically stays healthy for the whole year. We know he's going to miss 3 or 4 games. And that hasn't even happened yet. He's been healthy. So the ones that he's healthy for, those are the ones where you need him to be producing, and he's just not doing that. He has 1 red zone carry. This despite the fact that the Saints they put up more than 30 points in 2 of their 3 games so far. And Ingram has just 1 touchdown. John Kuhn stole a touchdown, which we're accustomed to John Kuhn doing
every so often, yes,
as a Packer. So I mean, I think you can hang your hat on the fact that he is their number 1 running back, probably until he gets hurt. So
on a very good offense,
where in theory he should be getting these red zone looks, and I'm sure that he will at some point. So I'm not convinced that he's an RB1 where you had to draft him. He was being taken as the 7th or 8th back off the board in the beginning of the season, and he just has never proven that he has that kind of upside. So he sort of has settled into right about where I thought he would, but he's just not a fantasy number 1 running back. So there's some level of concern here.
Matt, what's your answer?
I don't mean to be the second barfer, but I also have some.
Okay.
Although,
can you make a unique and different case?
It's
not easy. It's a challenge to go second.
To me, the biggest issue that Mark Ingram has is that the Saints' defense is so damn terrible that it might game flow him out of every game. He's still averaging about 15 touches per game on a good offense. That's still good. He's the RB1 on a good offense. That's still good. That's why I'm not acutely worried. But that defense is so horrifically terrible that they might give up 45 points a game, as they did on Monday night, and Breeze is going to be throwing it. Also, after San Diego this week, here's his schedule. He's got bye week, which you can't start him.
I think I have reason to believe he won't do well.
Carolina.
That's pretty tough.
Kansas City.
Middle of the pack is tough.
Seattle.
Tough.
San Francisco. That's kind of an easy game.
That might be a home road bit, but yes.
Denver.
That's
Carolina,
tough,
and Los Angeles.
That's the whole rest of the year. No, that's
the next 8 weeks. He's probably not startable in 6 or 7 of those weeks, including
not startable.
Yeah,
not startable.
Like
you're gonna
if you don't
bench
think he's
grade.
Then
you should drop him outright.
I think you should be trading him right now. If you own Mark Ingram,
that's a different story.
This is a great time to trade him off of a receiving touchdown in the game the other night. This is a perfect time to trade him. He's still got value right now, but as you can see with the schedule, it could drop off really quickly. So I have some level of panic, but yeah, just some. He's still an RB1 on a good offense. That's my only argument against myself.
Yeah, that is an argument. You've left me in a tough spot now. Because now, I thought you were going to easily win this one because you brought up the most salient point of the whole thing. His defense is so bad, the game flow goes away from him in every game.
Yeah,
that's the single most salient point out of all of this.
Talking.
Yeah, but unfortunately, you did keep talking.
Shut up. I was the second barfer who barfed like a third and a fourth time.
I'm going to pull the Hillary Clinton here thing and just stop talking and let him have himself.
I have all the best points. All of my points are way better than anyone else.
Well, the schedule point was still excellent, but really, you built an acute case. You did not build a sum case. You built an acute level of panic case.
I built a good case.
Yes, but you gave the wrong answer.
Is this about the ansers or the case, Judge Charchian?
You're supposed to build.
You have to defend your own point.
Right. You just told me he's not startable for 8 straight games, and you're only somewhat worried?
You're guilty.
I have to give the point. I have to give the point to the 2-time reigning champion, Christian.
God, I suck at this
Why
game.
couldn't you have just said acute? You'd have run away with this. Good heavens. Our next contributor in the panic room. Randall Cobb, 12 catches, 132 yards. No, that's not a 1-game total. That's your 3-game total, which, doing the division in my head, is about 4 catches and 45 yards per game and no touchdowns to this
pretty
year.
Good quick math.
Thank you very much. That's those are bad numbers, and that's it's a serious concern for Randall Cobb owners. This despite the fact that Jordy Nelson has been pretty productive, right? We always assumed that if Jordy Nelson would be productive and that Cobb would sort of come with him. And your worst case scenario was that Jordy would be bad and then Cobb would be bad again like last year, but that hasn't played itself out at all. So what is the appropriate level of panic here for Randall Cobb? Is it none, some, or acute? Matt.
I've got some again, and this time it's probably a legitimate some.
Okay.
The Packers really need to get Jordy Nelson going in order to open up the field for Randall Cobb. They kind of got him going in the first 2 weeks, just barely with touchdowns. But last week was the game where they really kind of opened it up and got Jordy involved. So now I'm excited to see. They got a bye week. They probably realized that they only threw the ball to Randall Cobb 3 times in that game. And once they come out of the bye, they have 3 home games where Aaron Rodgers has been significantly better. And their schedule also, again, it's easy. If you look at the schedule after the bye week, he gets Giants, Cowboys, Bears at home.
Giants, Cowboys, Bears.
All at home.
Giants and Cowboys
At
have
home
been
is what
pretty
matters.
At home is what matters.
pretty good
Yeah.
defenses.
But then he goes on the road to the Falcons, the Colts, and then the Titans and Redskins are after that.
That's pretty easy.
So there's a good 7-week stretch of really easy playing. The Packers know that they have to have more than one weapon on the field. They're going to try to spread the ball around, and they're going to get Cobb involved. So I'm somewhat worried, but I think that he'll come around.
All right, Christian. None, some, or acute levels of
Well,
panic over
I do
Randall
not want
Cobb.
to be in a second Barfer situation.
No, you never want that.
I'm going to go with acute here on Randall Cobb. I mean the numbers thus far are disgusting. They're ugly.
yeah,
and we thought, Matt, you mentioned the idea was, well, with Jordy Nelson, with a healthy Jordy Nelson, that's going to free the field up for Randall Cobb. Well, Jordy Nelson has looked pretty good. He looked pretty healthy last week when he scored 2 touchdowns.
He had his first sort of signature catch and run of the year last week.
Yeah, and I think, and we've said this,
And now it's on tape.
It's on tape, right?
Yeah.
Well, so if
So
whether
were
Jordy's
6
back
years
or
of
not-
Jordy doing that before this.
Jordy may have lost a half a step, and maybe that matters here. But so in this game where Jordy went bonkers, Randall Cobb was targeted 3 times and had 1 catch. Meanwhile, Devontae Adams has 2 touchdowns. Devontae Adams, who can't can barely catch the ball.
Right.
They're throwing it to him. He's targeted. I think he and Cobb are right around. They're within 1 or 2 of each other in terms of targets. So the Packers are clearly using Devontae Adams, maybe to Randall Cobb's detriment. And then the schedule, it's nice over the next 5 weeks when they play 4 of those 5 games at home. Late in the year, however, Seattle in week 14, Minnesota in week 16.
Oh.
That's 2 of your 3 playoff matchups
where you're one and done.
You're probably, especially if his numbers look like what they look like now, just pedestrian numbers, you're certainly not playing him in a tough matchup. So I would capitalize on the fools like Matt who are only panicking
Your Honor,
some.
I object.
And I would I would try to trade Randall Cobb right now while he still has some value.
Now, he says Seattle's a bad matchup, but Seattle traditionally has been
they've
good
struggled
matchup
with Cobb.
against the slot receiver.
I don't know if
and
it's
Randall Cobb.
It's not necessarily
So-
a good matchup so much as not as
As
horrific
bad,
a matchup
not as bad a matchup for
slot.
for everybody else. I had Matt winning this in part because of the schedule analysis, but you brought me back because in the ultimately I need to win 3 games in the playoffs. I don't think Randall Cobb's startable in 2 of those 3 games. Take one more star. Let's go to our final
it's a lame
guy.
duck final one
It is
now.
a lame duck.
It is lame duck. Brandon Marshall just so far obviously hurt his knee in week 2, wasn't himself in week 3, but played through it, which was for better or worse. 12 catches, 160 yards in 3 games for Brandon Marshall. Obviously, everything that could possibly go wrong at the quarterback position went wrong last week with Ryan Fitzpatrick. That trickled down to his receivers, none of whom did much of anything. Quincy Enunwa has taken some usage away from Brandon Marshall, and Enunwa is a big dude. And part of what Brandon Marshall has been able to do is separate himself on size and being a goal line target. Enunwa's creeping into that territory too. None, some, or deep levels of acute panic over Brandon Marshall.
I'm going to go with some on Brandon Marshall. Hasn't scored a touchdown. You mentioned it with Ryan Fitzpatrick, just has looked brutally bad in 2 of their 3 games.
He looked great 2
so
weeks
far.
ago, though.
Yeah,
he looked
and
phenomenal.
In between,
slinging it downfield.
He looked good. That
yeah.
was the game that Marshall got injured. And I guess I'm not convinced that Marshall is fully healthy. He just was... didn't seem like himself in week 3. Granted, everything that could go wrong did,
Right.
but maybe that was part of it. Brandon Marshall was a little gimpy and couldn't separate like he usually can. So I think there's a chance Marshall just isn't healthy here, and I also generally think that Fitzpatrick is going to regress a little bit this year, which we've seen already. And they have a tough schedule as well coming up. Especially they have Seattle in week 4, Arizona in week 6 with Patrick Peterson there. So. I don't know if Marshall is going to get much going over the next 2 or 3 weeks. And by that point, if you've been struggling through, the first 3 weeks with Brandon Marshall already, you're in big trouble if you're still sitting on him 3 weeks from now and he's done nothing in 2 of those 3 weeks.
All right. Matt, none, some, or acute levels of panic?
I'm chill here. And because I have absolutely nothing to lose, I have no panic on Brandon Marshall either. Here's the deal. His knee's a little bulky right now, and CP mentioned the schedule.
Wait,
but
bulky or bulky?
Balky, Bartakamos from Perfect Strangers. His knee's bad. After Seattle this week, he gets to go toe-to-toe with Pittsburgh and Antonio Brown, who he bet a car
Yes, again.
this offseason with Antonio Brown on who would have the better season. You know he's going to get up and go off in that game. But he's also got
he
some,
might bring the new car to
might-
that
yeah, he
game
might.
because
Yeah,
it's
hand
on
it
the
off
upper.
right then.
He's going to lose.
Hand off the keys right then and there.
He's going to try to at least win that matchup that day. He's also got Baltimore, Cleveland, and Miami on the schedule too. But not only that, the biggest deal, he's averaging 9 targets per game. He's had 8, 9, and 10 targets so far this season. Last year, he had double-digit targets in every game of the season but 5.
Yeah.
He's Ryan Fitzpatrick's favorite target still. They're going to throw the ball a lot. I'm not worried about it. I'm fine.
Yeah, that's
good.
that's the Trump thing.
I'm
Again.
good.
Trust me, they're gonna throw it.
Trust
me, I know. Believe me.
Yeah.
They're gonna do it.
I need some self-tanner or something like that. Some orange hair.
Aside from Ryan Fitzpatrick, I think everything's ultimately going to be fine. So I think I could go either way with this one. Fitzpatrick does worry me a little bit.
You know what?
He's going to
No.
give me a
But
pity
you know
point.
what? Why don't you give it to Matt?
I think we're going to give Matt
one.
we're going to give Matt the pity point because he narrowly lost a couple of these.
We need him to come back in a couple of weeks.
It's a good point.
We won't need him next week.
Next
but
week we don't need him.
Yeah, we don't want him
We're
to
gonna-
be too his dauber.
You've
to be
been
too far.
relegated. I hate to say it.
I'm going fetal, just like Brian.
Yeah,
I'll
but
tap him on the shoulder and get him out from
You
under
earned
his
it.
desk.
You really did win the last one. It's so don't
Wow.
feel.
I agree.
Don't,
I think you
even
did
though
too.
he
Thank
yielded,
you.
even though he yielded you the star, you won it anyway, Matt. I want you to know that.
Took a knee on that last star.
It's just like
I was
when
thinking
Brett Favre went fetal for
Strahan?
Strahan's
Yeah.
final 17th sack or whatever. That's kind of what just happened.
Yeah.
I was thinking about just abstaining because it didn't matter.
didn't
but then I
need-
figured,
you should've just wrote pass
I should
on the
at
board.
least make an argument.
You get a question mark
Yeah.
on your pen. That would
Just
have been
not
it.
said a word.
That's it.
But that
You don't
wouldn't-
have
that
to.
wouldn't help our listeners or our viewers.
No, and we're here for you. And we'll be here tomorrow. Thursday. What's Thursdays? I forget.
Thursday's kind of a random show.
It's a
Usually
random
it's
show.
Brian
Okay,
and Brian
all right.
and Matt's big adventure.
Then Friday we do the big DFS DraftKings show.
Yeah.
So we encourage you to stay tuned.
Mm-hmm.
Do you stay tuned? Come back to League Safe Post.
You know what we need, though? We
What?
need more people to not only rate and review our podcast on iTunes,
Yeah,
but
we need
also
that.
subscribe to us.
Yeah.
I mean, if you think about it, podcasts really just need the downloads. So even if you're not listening, it helps us out that you click this little
You
button and
downloaded it.
subscribe to us.
We don't get more money. You
Yeah.
don't get any money out of
Yeah,
it, but
exactly.
it would be nice.
It would be
Yeah.
nice. So if
Just
you rate
subscribe.
and review, hey,
Yes.
subscribe too.
All right. Thanks for watching. Back tomorrow.